Papa Bear Tim has a lot of juicy stuff. For today's part of the pop-up course, if you are new joining us to this course, this is a relatively short course we're doing on Mitch Horowitz's wonderful book, One Simple Idea. And more specifically, we are looking into common flaws in popular law of assumption and law of attraction, new thought teaching that we see all the time, particularly these days on places like YouTube, as well as other social media venues for manifesting bullshit like Reddit, TikTok, Instagram, etc. And yeah, this guy's here to join us. My daughter got him yesterday at a birthday party at a Lego store. Yeah, I mean, what we're going to talk about today, like a lot of what we're discussing in general in this course. And again, I'll put a link above to the playlist of all parts of this course. A lot of it, like to many of you, will seem kind of obvious, yet we need to hear it because there is such a high degree of bullshit, or if you want to call it spiritual materialism or spiritual bypassing, in this law of assumption, law of attraction space online right now. And so like the almost common sense, obvious atoms type of stuff we're going to explore a little bit today, and that Mitch is going to kind of clarify for us in the passage we're going to read from One Simple Idea. Even if it seems obvious, I think it's really beneficial for a lot of us to hear this information, because truth be told, if you're watching this, you're on social media, watching something about manifesting. And chances are that if you're doing that with any regularity, you're hearing a ton of bullshit that ties together with what Mitch is talking about here. It's just shocking. And you can disagree with me, but at this point, I'm very well versed with how this manifesting community operates online. And I've seen so much bullshit, so much misdirection, so many bad ideas, manipulation, just terrible advice being shared by people over the years in regards to applying this very pragmatic, valuable information, that it's just, it needs to be called out. And most people need to hear it from somebody. And I'm glad to be the person to share it with you. And I hope more people share this kind of stuff from the perspective that we're looking at it now, And I'm available for coaching. And, if you just have a question you want to ask, you can email me. I'll gladly talk to you to try to clarify this stuff for you. Clarification is needed. All right. So let's read from our excerpt today. Again, this course, we're basically just reading portions from one chapter in this book, the chapter called Does It Work? And the whole book is worth reading to or listening to, but this one chapter really captures so many of the problems that we have to navigate through if we're interested in these manifesting ideas and are going on social media to find out more about them and to get advice or guidance. So we left off last time with Mitch making the great point that to call suffering an illusion, yet also demand that it bend to desired change, signals a core inconsistency in the mind power perspective. Rather than seeing all of worldly clamor as an illusion, which is what a lot of traditional deep mysticism does, new thought defines whatever is discomforting as illusory, and its opposite as a reflection of a higher truth. Hence, new thought in the mind power philosophies seek to rise above the world and consume its bounty at the same time. In a biting critique, historian Freeman Champney called New Thought a rationale of transcend your cake, and eat it too. It's a great quote. Transcend your cake and eat it too. So this inevitably leads to so many problems, and the kind of problems that are rampant on social media when we discuss this stuff. A very common one Mitch is about to get into here. He writes, matters get more troublesome when new thought tries to explain chronic tragedies or catastrophes. In the 20th century, some new thought voices attempted to explain calamity by appending ideas of karma onto the positive thinking philosophy. Past life sins, in this view, could explain why a person or millions of people experience painful lives or violent deaths. Right? We see all this all the time of like people assigning blame onto others, right? Karmic blame onto others in new thought circles. You know, it's like, oh, it's because they must have, you know, their thoughts are creating the reality. So they created that terrible tragedy in their region or in their life, you know. Mitchell a bit later says, such arguments collapse under any degree of scrutiny. Spiritual insight arrives through self-observation, not in analyzing or justifying the suffering experienced by others. To judge others is to work without any self-verification, which is the one pragmatic tool of the spiritual search. The private person who can maturely and persuasively claim self-responsibility for his own suffering, or who can endure it as an inner obligation, shines a light for others. The person who justifies someone else's suffering, in this case through collective fault, only casts a stone. Now, this would seem ridiculous if it wasn't so common to even be talking about here. But people into things like Neville's philosophy, the law of assumption, they don't look at themselves and judge their own behavior as much often as they seemingly are judging other people's behavior and blaming and saying, oh, that's the law of assumption at work. You know, those people are, you know, are living a miserable life because they aren't assuming correctly. And that's why tragedy has beset them. You know, if you want to get philosophical, there could be some semblance of truth to that. But to have that as like your world outlook and how you judge other people in other situations is fucking awful. Get a grip. It's like Mitch said, it's like the opposite of what spirituality is supposed to be. You know, this is about exploring oneself and working on oneself, not to judge others. Oh, they're not assuming correctly. They're not implementing this advice or this philosophy correctly. It's their fault. You just have to listen to me. I'm doing it right. I mean, delusional. Nothing about this is spiritual. It's like spiritual bypassing 101. It's the kind of crap we see all the time. Mitch writes, in a sense, all of this ethical difficulty arises from the mind power movement's tendency to see reality as subject to a single law, namely the law of attraction, or we could say the law of assumption, because the law of assumption is so big today. With any type of spiritual maturity, I think almost all of us will see that the law of attraction and the law of assumption are the same fucking thing. Okay? Let's get real about this. People don't want to get real, but sorry, folks. This ethical difficulty arises from the mind power movement's tendency to see reality as a subject to a single law, namely the law of attraction, with its absolute powers of cause and effect. Unlike transcendentalists who study the cycles of nature, the teachers of New Thought made no allowance for the inevitability of night following day. They made no room for the balance of life and death, illness and health that Emerson depicted in his essays, which many New Thoughters called their inspiration. In actuality, references to Emerson did not appear in New Thought literature until the late 1880s. Diverging from transcendentalism, New Thought viewed life as subject to a single principle and ignored the prospect of multiple laws and forces. This limited New Thought's ability to respond to life's tragedies, complications, and reversals. New Thought's incomplete perspective can be traced back to a theological error made at its founding. To unearth this error may point the way toward fixing it and expanding the positive thinking movement's capacity to address all aspects of the human experience. Okay, so Mitch is again basically explaining why there's so much spiritual bypassing when it comes to these new thought, law of attraction, law of assumption ideas. And he's doing it very concisely in these passages and in this chapter in general. A little bit later on, he writes, in this view, this general new thought view, all events are meaningful and arise from the inner requirements of the individual, whether for growth, learning, or fulfillment. Hence, the law of attraction has linked the culture of new thought and new age from the 19th century to the current day. But where did this no accidents, there are no accidents, which we hear all the time, where did this no accidents idea come from? The conviction that thought is an all-encompassing force, one that supersedes happenstance or randomness, got launched in the final book of Warren Felt Evans. It was a work called Esoteric Christianity and Mental Therapeutics, which the mental healer published in 1886. By that point, Evans was the preeminent figure in the mind power culture. He incorporated a wide array of sources into its theology, ranging from Swedenborg to Buddhism to the occult ideas of theosophy, thus creating the spiritual openness for which New Thought became known. In his final book, Evans declared, in case of accidents or chance occurrences, there is always the relation of cause and effect. For it is inconceivable that a thing should occur without a cause, and all causes are mental. To support his point that all causes are mental, Evans drew upon a book that also happened to be Swedenborg's final work, The True Christian Religion, which the seer published in 1771. But Evans did not properly, I'm skipping a little bit here, Evans did not properly capture or contextualize Swedenborg's full statement. The seer's complete sentence was of a different tenor and far more discursive than what Evans used. What Swedenborg is saying is this: ethical thoughts without corresponding action make man's life a charade. The section of Swedenborg's book in which this passage appears makes no mention of bodily health or accidents. It deals specifically with the questions of charity and faith, and the need to act on one's highest ideals. That charity and faith are only mental and perishable things, Swedenborg wrote, unless when it can be done, they are determined to works and coexist in them. So, Swedenborg, in other words, is talking mainly here, Mitch is saying, about having our ideals then be acted upon, okay? Having them coexist. Mitch goes on to write, Swedenborg believed in correspondences between events on earth and events in heaven. He likewise believed the mind, when properly used, possessed a profound creative faculty, which could place a person in touch with higher energies. But he never made a claim like the one that Evans describes, in which all events, tragic or cheerful, emanate from the mind alone. Regardless, the metaphysical journalist Prentice Mulford wasted no time seizing upon this idea. And in the same year as Evans's book, he wrote, success in any business or undertaking comes through the working of a law. It never comes by chance. In the operations of nature's laws, there is no such thing as chance or accident. So there you have it. That's the bullshit origin of a lot of this singular law of attraction, law of assumption type of stuff that we, to this day, hear about all the time. And that has led to so much spiritual bypassing in this community of people trying to apply these laws. A lot of that spiritual bypassing is inadvertent and done unintentionally because these dogmatic teachers focused on one law are saying that's the way to do it. Mitch writes, and there it was. There is no such thing as chance or accident. It was the premise of the law of attraction, a term Mulford resurrected a few years later, as well as the future credo of the New Age. There are no accidents. This perspective was rooted in Evans' misinterpretation of Swedenborg and then got memorably reworked by the journalist Mulford. The law of attraction ultimately burdened New Thought with a principle that was difficult to defend and one that was never really constructed in its foundational sources to function as an overarching rule of life. The founders of New Thought evidently did not pause over Evans to ask, isn't it possible that humanity exists under multiple laws and demands, including accidents, and that our lives may serve many imperatives, some of them inscrutable and even painful? Don't we, like all creatures, exist to fertilize, feed, and facilitate an unimaginably vast scale of creation on which we have little perspective? Those are damn good questions Mitch asks, and they also are common sense questions. And the kind of questions that most serious spiritual traditions and mystical traditions look at and consider. It is not something that is considered seriously, those questions, in modern popular manifesting circles usually. And that is a huge fucking problem. And in my opinion, there's no way around that. You got to look at this stuff more seriously, more maturely. And, ask some of the questions and get answers to the questions that Mitch is asking here. So, yeah, we will continue exploring this. The next video of this pop-up course. And if you have any questions before then or would like coaching, I can be reached at info@radicalcounselor.com. Enjoy.